Olá, aqui é José Salib Neto. É um prazer estar com vocês aqui. Estão lendo o nosso livro, Estratégia Adaptativa. Foi uma honra ter entrevistado o David Niekerk, que tem uma carreira fantástica. Começando, se formou em engenharia pela Academia Militar dos Estados Unidos, West Point, que é a nata da área militar dos Estados Unidos. Eu já tive experiência de estar lá, fantástico lugar. E logo após fez duas pós-graduações, mestrado também. Trabalhou em recursos humanos em grandes empresas e durante 16 anos comandou a área de pessoas, recursos humanos da Amazon, que ajudou a Amazon a ser essa potência que é hoje. Então, aproveitem porque está muito legal, conteúdo fantástico. Hello, David. Thank you very much for accepting our interview. We're honored that you accepted our invitation to talk about your amazing experience, not only at Amazon, but your whole career for the Brazilian business community. What an amazing career. When I look at your bio, it seems like you have like 200 years.
I don't know if I have 200 years, but it was a very diverse background that brought me to Amazon in the first place. And I think that, ironically, is what attracted Jeff Bezos and the team there, that they weren't looking for just the run-of-the-mill typical person. They were looking for a very diverse background to create something that had never really been created before.
That's wonderful. Talking about your background, I mean, when I looked at the current person who's leading HR for Amazon, it comes from FedEx Express Logistics. Yes. And then look at your bio, you're in the military, had a more science career and engineering. What's the thinking behind it? I mean, when here in Brazil, 99% of people in HR basically come from humanities,
Yes.
I'm very curious to know what's the thinking behind it.
So I do give myself credit. I'm the one who picked Beth Galetti, who's the current SVP of HR at Amazon, to be my replacement when I was retiring. But the thinking behind it, and my background being very diverse, not a traditional HR background, I did do HR. I was an infantry officer, then got medically reclassified as an HR officer in the Army. My last few years there. And so when I was leaving the Army, that was the career field I decided to pursue, initially going to PepsiCo. And that's how I got started myself in HR, which was a little unusual. I wasn't, to your point, it was not the typical person when I joined PepsiCo with that kind of background, especially military background. There was still question about that. And I even had to fight that trend at Amazon, where there was a thinking that the military mindset was too disciplined and set in its way and not creative and innovative. And I said, you really don't understand the military, where an officer always has to be creative and innovative in everything they do. But when I thought about my replacement, and I thought about the nature of Jeff Bezos, who really appreciates data-driven analytical decisions. One of the worst things you could say to Jeff Bezos is, I have a gut feeling about this. Because he would want to say, well, there must be something driving that gut feeling. I want to know what that is. Give me the data that's creating that gut feeling. So you would never use a term like that. And we were actually, I was the bar raiser, as they called him at the time, the person responsible for the interview loop to make sure that the person you're hiring is better than 50% of the people already working in the company. That's wow. The system we set up called the bar raiser. And I was the bar raiser for Beth Galetti's interview loop in transportation. And she was being looked at as a vice president in the transportation organization at Amazon. And after the interview process, I went to Dave Clark, who's the senior vice president of operations for Amazon, and said, I have an out-of-the-box thought. We've been working for over a year to try and find my replacement. And what about Beth as my replacement? And Clark agreed that this would be quite a different approach, but we all liked that she had great leadership skills. She had great people skills. She had written a paper about her experience with labor relations in Europe, where she had been for, I think, 6 or 7 years with FedEx. She'd also served in Canada as the chief information officer. So I said, Beth brings great business skills. She clearly has good people management skills. And what I said is I would dedicate next year, before I retired, to teach her everything she needed to know about HR. And I think she'll be a quick study and she will learn all of that. That's the easy part. The hard part is leadership, strategic thinking, analytical skills. And she will bring a whole new perspective to the company, because up to that point, for close to 17 years, I had been the only person in that job. From the very beginning, when we first created the Amazon operations organization, I'd been the senior HR leader for all those years, one of the unique few jobs in the company that had the same person in it for all that time. So I said it'll be very healthy for the organization to have someone completely different coming in, bringing a whole new perspective. And she did phenomenally well. She caught on very quickly. She did bring a whole different approach than I had been taking. She created a business development group and wanted analytics driven in every business meeting, and an analytics team she brought on board, and she transformed different things. And as I was a bit surprised, but not overly surprised, that a year into the job, Jeff Bezos said, hey, I want you to become my new head of HR for the entire company. And so Beth was selected for that job just before I was retiring. And I told her, I'm not staying. So you can now, your first job as the head of HR is to find your replacement. And it took me about a year to find you. So good luck. So that was how she got in that role. And she's done phenomenally well, because I knew that that skill set is what Bezos would be looking for. Someone very atypical of HR in a traditional sense, someone who's very business engineering focused, electrical engineering background she had initially in college. So she takes a very analytical approach, but is very people-centric and understands the value of leadership. So that, and has done very well in that role. I mean, I think a typical example is Jeff Bezos had made her in charge of coming up with a whole new creative process for developing Amazon's medical insurance program, and figuring out how to do this in a completely innovative way. And they've partnered since with Jamie Dimon and Berkshire Hathaway to come up, all three companies, to come up with a complete new way of doing medical coverage in corporations. And Beth was the person that Jeff appointed to head that up.
That's what's Amazon's number of employees now? About 1 million?
About 1 million employees worldwide now.
That's amazing. I mean, how can you keep a company with a culture of customer focus, customer obsession, not focus, entrepreneurship, and raising the bar for the whole world? I mean, I see Amazon just making every company get better. So is there one culture or three cultures?
There's one culture, and this was actually one of the greatest challenges. That's why the last 2 years of my assignment at Amazon, when I announced that I would be retiring and gave a 2-year notice, and they said, well, what are you going to do in the interim? I said, I'm going to be the chief culture and engagement officer, because I feared the same thing, that in that 2-year time frame, the company was going to double in size. And I said, it'll probably double again. And that is this challenge. How do we continue to maintain the culture of a company when just about everyone is new? Even at that point in time, 50% of everyone working in the company had been in the company less than 1 year. Wow. And that pretty much remained the case. And so the focus of the original invention of Amazon to be Earth's most customer-centric company serves a great purpose, because that becomes the single unifying focus of everyone who joins Amazon. And everyone pretty much there, I would challenge anyone to ask someone what the mission of Amazon is, and everyone quickly learns day one that the single mission of the company is to be Earth's most customer-centric company.
Wow.
And everything you do starts with the customer and works backwards.
Mm-hmm.
And so everyone, fortunately, can relate to that because everyone is a customer of something. And they've been customers. And so they know how they would want to be treated as a customer and what things you would do. And so it makes it simple, and simplification is one of the critical factors of culture at Amazon. It makes it simple to understand what you should be focusing on. Is this something that you're doing that will, in the end, make it easier and better for the customer? Now, sometimes it's an internal customer that you're focusing on. And a second piece of that culture is simplification. And this was something I worked on all the time. We wanted to create a culture where there is no value in having information that only you know. And I would talk about this with people. I said, in most companies, there's always these experts who have more information than anyone else. In fact, their status in the company is that they have all the information and you have to go to them to find out how to get something done. And I said, our goal is to create a culture where if you have information like that, you get credit for teaching and sharing that information with others, so that you are known as someone who teaches and shares information with everyone, and you grow them to be at the same level you're at versus you holding on to that information as a special place of being. I experienced that firsthand in the early days when we had computers and everyone, instead of before Windows, and we all operated on MS-DOS. And you always had to know the code to put in .. and type in the code to get to something that you needed. And invariably in a company, there would be experts in MS-DOS, and you would have to go to them begging on your hands and knees to help you run a program or to do something. And when they would start to work on it, you would ask, can I write that down or can I look over your shoulder? Oh, no, that's my special information. You can't know that. And because power was in that information. And I've always stuck with me. In fact, the beauty of Windows was now everyone had that power because all you had to do was point and click with a mouse, which did the MS-DOS calculations for you. And it took away that special power. And I always thought if I was going to be involved in creating a company or organization, I would want to create one where the power was diffused to everyone. And not one person would be accountable for knowing more than anyone else, but everyone would have that. And we would reward people who would teach and share the information they had with others versus hold on to it, counter to how most organizations operate. And so that's one of the secrets of Amazon too, is that everything is about simplification. I called it the Star Wars factor. If you ever watch one of those Star Wars movies, the people are running, the stormtroopers are chasing after them. They jump on a star cruiser, they sit in this pilot seat, they punch 3 or 4 buttons and they're flying at light speed. In fact, anyone can fly one of those things. It's so simple, it appears. You don't really have to have any special skills. You may have some special skills to get around tight spots, but anyone could be flying at light speed. I said, imagine if we designed our processes and systems so that you could sit at the chair and anyone could do it. That was the way we wanted to go, so that training would be less than a day to do anything. And that is one of the secrets at Amazon then too, is that simplification of our processes always trumps complication. And then we want online wikis, we call them wikis, which would provide anyone information about any system that we're operating on. So if you need to get direction or want to know how to do something, in today's world where that applies is YouTube. If you want to know how to change the lawnmower battery in an electric lawnmower, you would go on YouTube and you would find 5 videos on how to do it or how to even open up a package of anything. It's that kind of simplification. We built that at Amazon before that YouTube had that, of how to do everything, and created a world of self-service to self-empower, just like we wanted our customers to be self-empowered when they shopped on our website to find, discover, and buy anything they wanted, and to make it simple and intuitive when you went on it. we wanted to create a culture so that internally it was that way also.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the secrets, and that's what I said we have to preserve and put in place, because still to this day, with so much hiring going on, I think that statistic still holds, that generally almost half the people working in the company are new to the company that year. And
Wow.
how can you continue to scale and grow if it's too complicated? So that's the secret of the cultural success at Amazon.
Mm-hmm. And what was your biggest challenge to see Amazon, growing at such an accelerated speed for you to manage all that? I mean, especially on the people side.
Yeah, it was tremendously difficult. Jeff Bezos had one of these concepts called get big fast.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of his driving factors, that speed mattered. I'll tell you a funny story about this process. That's a little bit of Amazon history that most people don't know about. And in those early days back in 1999, there's the debate that went on in the company about whether Amazon should be a logistics and supply chain operation company. There was a lot of people who said, we're an internet company, no brick and mortar. We're going to provide the software and the electronics and the simplicity around that for customers, but we're not a logistics company. We're not a supply chain company. There's companies out there that specialize in that. Why don't we outsource our supply chain and fulfillment and distribution and transportation to one of these specialty companies, because that is way too hard,
Mm-hmm.
way too complicated to get into. And Jeff Bezos entered that debate by saying and reminding everyone that the overall mission of Amazon was to be Earth's most customer-centric company.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, if we don't own the back end, if from the time you click your mouse when you've placed an order, and that now goes to a third party that wants to provide that support for us, they will never have the same engagement of customer centricity. They will never have the same involvement and dedication to the customer that we will have if we own it.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, we must become Earth's greatest e-commerce, logistics, fulfillment, supply chain company. And the decision was made to do that in 1999. With those days, we had two tiny little warehouses, one in Seattle, which was about 75,000 square feet, and one in Delaware, which is 150,000 square feet. And the decision was made, get big fast. And so the company went and spent $300 million, the largest sum of money ever spent at that time in capital, to get 5 giant warehouses.
Mm-hmm.
And these were scattered across the United States in places like Fernley, Nevada, and Campbellsville, Kentucky, and Lexington, Kentucky, and Coffeyville, Kansas, and McDonough, Georgia. Those were the 5 locations. And we were going to hire our own staff to go work in those buildings. So in those days, we probably had 1,800 to 2,000 employees in the whole company.
Mm-hmm.
And we needed to get 10,000 hires to be brought and working in those warehouses between the period of April to November of 1999. And nothing like that had ever been done. In fact, Jeff Bezos went to the press and said Amazon was launching the largest and fastest expansion of logistics in US peacetime history, went to the press. And in those days, I was the director of employee relations, and my job was to put policies and processes together as the company scaled that would simplify and enable transactions to take place. And I got called in the office and they said, Niekerk, we have a new job for you. And I said, oh, what's that? He said, you are going to become the new director of strategic growth. I said, wow, that sounds great. What does that mean? It says your job will be to figure out how to get these 5 giant warehouses, more than 4 million square feet in size total, staffed, trained, policied up, and running before the Thanksgiving holiday hits, when the big boom for shopping happens. You need to figure out how we're going to hire all those people, train them, what the levels should be, how you structure them, put all those and by the way, we're going to start it right now. and you have to have it all up and running by that time, and it needs to start running right away. I said, that sounds like a pretty challenging job. They said, yes, that's why you're now the director of strategic growth. And so I immediately went back. I had to bring in 27 recruiters, and they worked 24/7, and we put a PERT chart together that showed how many people had to be hired every single day. I had a training team to figure out how to train people. I worked with an organization development team inside the company to figure out what levels we should create, because I knew Jeff Bezos hated levels, because Microsoft, one of the sister companies in Seattle, had, I think, 89 levels. Jeff hated that.
Wow.
So we needed to create very few levels. Today, Amazon basically only has 10 levels, and actually there's no level 9. We did that on purpose. So there's really only 9 levels, from the entry level hourly employee to the vice president in the company. But we had to create these levels and say what the job titles were and put job descriptions together, put training, all of this while we're staffing and putting and hiring all these people together. And so it was very, very challenging, quite frankly. And on top of that, I knew I had to come up with a system to staff up for the holiday, because I considered it kind of I built on my Army experience. I spent 10.5 years as an Army officer. And I knew that the way the Army would scale in combat situations was you would bring the Army Reserves and the National Guard to active duty. And I said, we need to create an Amazon reserve force that we can scale up during the holiday and scale down. And that was the start of us bringing in temporary agencies to bring temporary employees in for 3 to 4 months. So I had that contract and that process on the side and trying to figure out how to make that work all at the same time. And in the month of November, after all this was going, and I was having daily calls with all the locations and hearing, how's it going? Or is everything working? Are people learning their skills? Is everyone understanding? And of course, my calls were always, yes, yes, it's all great. Everything's great. But one of the things I had learned as an Army officer was you walk the line. If you're in a defensive position, you go out there and literally walk the line and see where the machine gun position is and that it's set up the right way, that we've put lines of fire out properly. You want to see where the marks are that's been set up, that you'll have mortars come in and provide support. All those various things, if you just trust that it's happening without you physically seeing it, you get in trouble. So I went and took a week-long trip and went out to every single one of those fulfillment centers. And in each one, my heart sank into my stomach because it was total chaos. Total chaos in each building I went to. It was completely different, of course, than the reports I'd been given over the phone. And people, there were so many new people being hired at one time. Everything was new to everyone. Even the software was designed to work in the buildings by brilliant software engineers in their 20s who had never set foot in a warehouse. Mm-hmm. But they had designed the software. So of course there's going to be those idiosyncrasies about how it works or doesn't work. Everything was not working, and there was no way that I knew we would be able to get through the holiday rush starting in November. And so I came back from that experience feeling downtrodden and very worried. But one of the core concepts of Amazon is this leadership principle called ownership. We want to create a culture where everyone acts and feels like an owner versus a renter. There's a big difference between renters and owners. Renters, when they see a problem, they call up the owner of the building, say, hey, you need to go fix this. An owner can't call anyone but themselves. They're responsible for fixing it. And we wanted to create that culture. And for an owner, there's 2 concepts. There's 2 pieces to it. Number 1, identify the problem as an owner. Number 2, an owner always has to come up with a solution, a possible solution to it. Just like if the window's broken in your home and you say, wow, the window's broken. That's step 1. Yep, you've identified the problem. But now you have to come up with a possible solution on how you're going to fix it. So I knew as an owner, I identified the problem. We've been overwhelmed, totally overwhelmed by this massive hiring, new processes, new procedures. I think we expanded too fast, too big. So I knew that problem. Number 2, I had to come up with a solution. And Monday morning, I had to meet with the brand new VP of Worldwide Operations, Jeff Wilkie, who today is the head of the consumer business for all of Amazon, but he had only been hired about 3 weeks earlier. And I was his head of HR, and he and I worked together for 8 years before he moved in to become the head of retail for Amazon. So it was a great experience. But about 3 weeks into the job, I was having a meeting with him on Monday morning because he wanted to hear, how are things going? Tell me, are we all set to go? And so I thought about that over the weekend and what I would do and say. And when I came in on Monday morning, I went to Jeff and said, he said, well, how's it going? Are we all set to go? Is everything in place? We're only 2 weeks away from our big holiday peak period of Thanksgiving. And I said, remember those horrible stories that have come out about Amazon, Amazon.bomb, Amazon.gone, Amazon.con? I said, my favorite one was the article called Amazon.toast. And I said, Jeff, I have to tell you right now, we are Amazon.toast. And he looked at me, he said, what? I said, it is total chaos. And I said, but I do have a plan. You may not like my plan, but I have a plan. And he said, what's that? And I said, what we have to do to survive this giant holiday is create overnight Earth's most talented hourly workforce that's ever been established to work in a warehouse environment. And he said, I thought that was your job all along. And I said, it has been, but I screwed that one up. Obviously, it's not working. And one of the things we like at Amazon is the ability for people to be self-effacing, to tell the truth, to not cover it up. That's one of our cultural biases that we love, that you're open and honest how things are. And I was very open and honest. I said, it's screwed up. It's not working. But I do have a plan. He said, well, what's your plan? I said, right here in the city of Seattle at the Amazon headquarters, we have 1,800 of the most talented 20-somethings that have ever walked the face of the earth, working as lawyers, working in HR, working in finance, working in sales, working as buyers, and lots of software engineers. Here's my plan. My plan is we take every single one of those employees and we assign them to work in one of these 5 big fulfillment centers for a 2-week period, everyone. And there's 2 shifts, so we cover 4 weeks, starting with Thanksgiving, going through Christmas, and overnight, we will have created the most talented hourly workforce this earth has ever seen. And he turned to me and said, that's your plan? I said, that's my plan. If you don't like it, we have to come up with a different plan. Pardon me. So that was our plan. And we went and talked to Jeff Bezos about it. And he listened to me. He said, let me make sure I understand here, Niekerk. You want to take my most talented software engineers, my talented buyers, my talented finance team, my somewhat less valuable lawyers, and put them all to work in the warehouses? I said, that's the plan. And he turned to me and said, there's only one thing I like about this plan after thinking about it. He said, you are bringing this plan to the table while we still have time to actually execute on it. Most of the time, problems are presented to me when there's not enough time to do anything about it. In this case, we could actually do this. You have 8 days before they need to be in place to make this happen. And so he thought about it and said, you've put me in no other choice. We've got to do it. And because he loved Star Trek, he said, make it so. And so there we are. So I always say, be careful what you ask for, you may get it. And so I then had to figure out, how do you do this? So we had a big meeting set up in our giant conference room, the biggest one we had, that could hold 450 people at a time. And we broke people up A through F and G through L, and said you had to come to a mandatory meeting in this building, PacMed building, the PacMed headquarters. And they would all come in the room, and they were all wondering what this was all about. And so I wanted to start off on a positive note. And so I turned and said, quiet, please. And I said, I want you to raise your hand. Who here has ever been to Disneyland or Disney World? Raise your hand. And all these people raised their hands and they started talking about the great experiences they had, and they're mumbling. And then someone would say, "Oh my God, they're sending all of us to Disneyland." And I said, "No, it's better than that. You all get to work for 2 weeks in one of our fulfillment centers." And then the room would go quiet and they said, "What?" And I said, "I need you because I have screwed this up. I desperately need you to go work in these buildings. And if you don't do it, the company may not survive.
Wow.
In fact, we're betting the whole future of the company on you to do this."
Wow.
And what happened is they all did it. And if for some reason you could not go, you still had to work for 2 weeks in the warehouse in Seattle, right there in the city of Seattle, or in customer service, in our customer service center there. So everyone for 2 weeks, even Jeff Bezos did this. In fact, Bezos was so worried, he brought his wife, Mackenzie, and both his mother and father, and they both all went to Campbellsville, Kentucky. And they worked in Campbellsville, Kentucky. People were pretty thrilled to see Jeff Bezos on the line, picking, packing, and shipping boxes like everyone else. And we survived that holiday through that process. It became a phenomenal success because, of course, the people went there and they came with brand new ideas. They were very engaged. They saw things in a way that they had never seen it before. Most all of them had never set foot in a warehouse environment before. They thought about their job and how it interfaced with that. And it was so successful that the senior leadership team with Jeff Bezos said we needed to preserve this. And they created something called customer connection training. And now every senior manager in worldwide operations must spend an entire week working on the floor in a warehouse before they go into their regular job to gain this same level of experience. But that's the hidden story, how we survived that initial onslaught. And it took 4 years. So for 4 years, we ended up doing the same thing, drafting people to go work in the warehouses because we had never figured, the growth was so great that we had not figured out how do you scale and get people in place. So it took about 4 years before we fully understood it without having to rely on that process. But it was a big gamble. It was a big gamble to think, did we really hire people who had the degree of ownership, degree of engagement, degree of willingness to go out and work and leave their families for 2 weeks and work in a warehouse environment for 8 to 10 hours a day?
Wow.
My bet was yes, we did. And fortunately it worked out, and that's how we survived.
David, that's amazing. We're big admirers of Amazon as a management system. And we are management lovers and experts. We write books here. As a matter of fact, we are publishing in October our strategy book, and Amazon is one of the cases there.
Oh, great.
And so yeah, it's wonderful. And you have seen leaders in different generations, starting over at the military. Then we worked, I think, at 2 previous companies.
3 companies, PepsiCo,
before, and you see
Mobil, ExxonMobil, and Allied Honeywell.
Yeah, so you have a oil company and then Honeywell, and then moving on to the big technology company that Amazon is. What's your take on the skills Bezos that you've seen that is necessary to win today, that is beyond what you see in the more traditional companies? Right. Because a lot of the people that are not being able to transform their companies, they don't have really the necessary skills and mindset to win in the digital era. So what are the skills that you see that you recommend for other leaders to develop?
So 3 factors that I've seen that make a big difference. And I've seen these be the derailers in other companies too, but I think they're critical for today. The first one is humbleness, that you take the time to learn about every role that you have responsibility for. And I learned that from the Army too, where you may be the captain, the company commander, but you need to understand every part of the role of that infantryman, that individual soldier, what it's like to walk in his shoes, or nowadays her shoes, and how those weapons operate and what their roles are. And don't elevate yourself that someone else, the sergeants have to be responsible for that, not me. And at that Amazon, we talked about that as the roles and the jobs 3 to 4 levels below you. 3 to 4 levels below you. You've spent time doing it. Even Jeff Bezos, you know, when we created Fulfillment by Amazon, this concept where anyone can ship their items to Amazon and Amazon will store it in our warehouses and sell it, it was creating tremendous chaos because people were shipping things to our warehouses that weren't properly prepared. And Jeff Bezos had heard stories about that. And he said, I'm going to go find out firsthand how bad it is. And he went and spent 5 days working on the inbound dock in Lexington, Kentucky, along with those associates, literally receiving product from when the truck door opened and it would be brought in. He had to figure out how to receive, and he saw how bad and challenging it was. So he took the time to go probably 10 levels, if not more, below him and spent time to know it firsthand. So number one, take the time to know about all the jobs below you and never think that that is something beneath you. When the famous data breach took place at the Target stores, Jeff Bezos pointed out that both the chief information officer and the CEO had never taken the time to go down to the stores and see firsthand the reports that were coming in that they have a problem. They were just reading the reports of others. And he said that's part of what would led to the data breach, that they didn't take the time to know and understand and see firsthand at the levels below them. The humbleness for you as a leader to go do that and understand it's critical. The second piece that makes great leaders today is dealing with the data, understanding the data behind it. Don't say, once again, that's someone else's job, or I'm not a data person, but always looking for data. The way Jeff Bezos would often tell us, he said, if we walked into this room and we looked up at the ceiling and we all estimated how high is the ceiling from the floor, and I want everyone to go to the whiteboard and write what they think that number is. And he said, I bet we could average out all of those guesses and come up with a pretty close analysis. But he said, none of those would be as good as someone coming with a measuring stick and literally measuring it. And then you know 100% how high it is. He said, I find processes all over this company where nobody's taking the time and the energy to literally collect the real data. They're all going by guessing because maybe it's too hard or maybe it takes too much time. But he said the time it takes to get real data and analyze that data to make solid decisions by pays for itself in spades. So have the discipline to get the data. And so what I would tell leaders is you must always start your meetings and your discussions with subordinates and others with the word why. Why we are doing this. And that should be data driven. And if you as the leader don't know the why, and if the answer that we're doing this because someone above you told you to go do it, but you have no idea why, I said you need to stop and understand the why. Because maybe the why isn't correct. And that's one of the critical factors. A great story I'll share with you, another hidden Amazon story about that is in the early days, we created a part of the sales group was called health and safety, something of that terms. And inside the health and safety store, there was a, I'll call it the sex store, but it was really more than that. It had a fancier term, but it was all the things that you would need for your sex life, basically, that we were selling. Because of course, what the salespeople figured out is that's something that a lot of people want, but they feel a bit embarrassed to walk in a traditional store and buy these things. So they'd much rather receive them and buy them on Amazon online. And so they initially decided, the logistics people said that all these products would be centralized in our Campbellsville, Kentucky warehouse because it was centrally located and we would be able to get those pieces out. And I think the store was called Sex and Sensibility or something like that. Sensuality, Sex and Sensuality or something store. Well, what they didn't think about, no one asked me about that. It was purely a logistics decision. One of the data points they didn't think about was that warehouse in Kentucky was built in the center of what we call the American Bible Belt. Very religious people working there. And what they found is many of those people working there had personal objections to the various sex toys and items and things coming into the store to be put on the shelf and picked for customers. And so we had to come up with a quick solution. And the quick solution they came up with is that on the inbound dock, there would be a team that would overwrap these items in black cellophane, so you actually couldn't see what was in it, and put the label on the outside of it so it would not offend anyone who was working in the building. Mm-hmm. And that was it cost us some money, obviously, prep work that had to be done to that, but it worked. And that was part of the process. Well, go a few years down the road, and this sex and sensuality store is booming. We're talking 500 to 800% growth a year. And so the decision is made, we have to expand it to other locations. So as it went to different places, that same standard operating procedure of overwrapping the material went with it. This is how you do it. And there was a team of associates, hourly employees in Phoenix, Arizona, who were overwrapping these items in their warehouse. And one of the team members was talking to another one and says, why do they have us doing this senseless job of overwrapping these items? And they were saying, if we start with the customer, certainly our customers aren't embarrassed ordering these things. Are we overwrapping them for the customer? The customer knows what they're ordering. Why are we doing this? And no one had a good answer to the why. And so these associates pulled together a Kaizen, their own team, and they came up with, if we stop overwrapping these items, how much money would it save our warehouse? And they found out that it would save just that one warehouse $75,000 a year in overwrapping costs. And they multiplied that to the 20 warehouses we had then selling it. And they said, this makes no sense. Why are we doing this overwrap? Nobody knew the history or the reason behind it, but these associates identified the problem themselves, did their own Kaizen, presented their case to their leaders, and they eliminated that SOP. And that's the power of ownership and engagement and questioning, and the power of why. Mm-hmm. Why we do. So that's something that the leader should do. And the third thing is people above numbers. What I would always tell leaders is you never make your numbers on the backs of your people. Mm-hmm. That you always think about your people, because that's very short-term thinking, that you're going to push, because anyone can get results by intimidating, scaring, threatening their people, but it's short-term. And everything at Amazon is about long-term. So the third piece is think about how you engage and grow and develop your people to achieve your numbers versus achieve your numbers in spite of your people. Mm-hmm. And those are the three factors that I think make for great leaders in today's world.
David, I have two more quick questions. How to do the culture of innovation in such a large company without people being scared to make mistakes? For example, here in Brazil, Brazil is not a very innovative country, and one of the reasons is that people are really, really worried about making a mistake and getting fired. So how you develop such a culture in such a large company?
Let me go back to the story about Jeff Bezos working that line. And he worked for 5 days when stuff would come on the inbound truck and be thrown there, and they'd have to sort through it. And on Friday, he had a big meeting with everyone. And everyone, of course, was quite proud of what they'd established in the process. And they asked Jeff Bezos what he thought about the process for receiving new inbound products off the trucks. And he looked at everyone and he said to them right there, he said, we absolutely suck at doing this. We suck at this. We are horrible at this. It is a horrible process. And he said, that is the best information we could hear. Because he said, you know what? We still are one of the best people in the world, and it sucks. Imagine how great we can make this process when we improve it. So when I come back the next time, I want to see this be a great process. Today it sucks. Let's make it all better. And let's put process in place. Let's put process improvement. I want the ideas of the people actually touching it and handling it to make it better. And so when you have a CEO who openly says it's not a crime to have a mistake. In fact, Dave Clark, the head of operations, said that problems are like gold. Problems are like gold because when you find a problem, it helps us know where to dig deeper to get more gold, because when we're finding that problem, it means the customer isn't finding that problem. And our job is to find the problem before it impacts the customer. So we want problems identified. We want people to identify things. However, that's always the first step. Remember, I said the second step, when I would often remind leaders when they would point out how things weren't working, I said, that's great, but you as a leader now have a second part. What is your recommendation on what we do about it? Mm-hmm. Just don't throw it out there that it's a problem, but now you need to think about it. How would you solve this problem? What things would you do differently to get there? And so that culture is fostered at Amazon of identifying problems you don't get your head chopped off on. In fact, people who identify problems are heroes. But the second part must always follow, what is your recommendation on how to resolve this problem? When you create a culture like that, it's powerful.
Mm-hmm. And final question, Dave. I mean, we could be here for weeks talking about this. How about, Amazon now is hitting a target of over $1.5 trillion. I mean, I've never thought in my life I would see a company that has such a value. How do you keep a culture of ambition? Because without ambition, you cannot, value that much. I mean, how do you keep that thing and having people, a million people just wanting to do more?
So the secret of success, and by the way, the chief financial officer, Brian Olsovsky, is someone who I also worked with and was brought in operations while I was there also. So I've had the pleasure of seeing the very senior people who were there. I was part of the creation of Amazon Prime and knew the leaders who started that and brought them on board. So, and as I think about those ideas, the way you do that is through great ideas and empowering people with those great ideas. So every business team enables part of their meeting at least once a week for presentations to be made by people in the organization who have great ideas that come up. The guy, Greg Greeley, who was at the time the finance vice president of operations, had the idea of giving away shipping for free at Amazon. And we thought he was absolutely crazy. We thought, you're the finance guy. How can you do that? That's going to bankrupt us. And you're coming up with the idea. And it got presented to Jeff Bezos, and Bezos loved it. And originally we called it Super Saver Shipping. And we started with a $100 purchase, and then he knocked it down to $75, and then $50, and then finally $25. And you got free shipping. And it was almost bankrupting us. In fact, one time we went to Jeff and said, we need to stop this Super Saver Shipping. It's killing us. We're losing hundreds of millions of dollars because we don't know how to do it. And he said, well, you better figure it out, because if you don't, you're going to totally bankrupt this company and it'll be your fault. Go back and figure it out. Now, what Bezos understood is no one else knew how to do this either in the world. And by us doing it, we would cost us hundreds of millions of dollars, but when we figured it out, it would be such a game changer that everyone else would have to figure it out. And he knew that they would not have the discipline or the ability to do it, so it would cost them even more to figure out how to do it. So the way we keep innovation in place at Amazon is you not only have no bad ideas, but you take the discipline to put that idea together, you formalize it, and you present it before a leadership team. And the leadership team evaluates all these ideas. And if they think it's worth trying, they go ahead, and it's like seeds, scattering seeds. They'll give you time, energy, and money and a team to go work on it. And that's led to all kinds of things, everything from marketplace to Amazon Prime, which was an idea that was done. All of these were brilliant ideas, and there's hundreds of them throughout the company, many of which don't work. In fact, the most famous one is probably the Amazon Fire Phone, which I think the company lost over $600 million on, the Fire Phone. But part of the application of the Fire Phone was this little thing that worked really well, and that sprung into something known as the Amazon Echo with Alexa, was built into the Fire Phone. And that has created an amazing new product that's worldwide, and Amazon's now the leader of. And so Bezos would say, even if something doesn't work, there's often many great things that come from that learning that can be shared other ways. And so you create a culture that rewards people for innovative thinking, that knows that many of these won't work, but you gain something each time you do it. The other thing is long-term thinking versus short-term thinking. At Amazon, the company thinks 5 to 7 years out. Most companies are thinking quarter to quarter. It has to work for this quarter. At Amazon, we'll give you 5 to 7 years often to make this thing work. And after that time frame, if it's not really working, we'll say, well, what did we learn from it? Let's move on.
David, the final words for the members of our platform and the readers of our book on strategy where innovation, where Amazon will be featured for Brazil. Amazon is relatively new in Brazil, but is becoming to get some traction here. And, I love it. It's my books are there, especially now in this particular time where bookstores don't know how to operate. And if it wasn't for Amazon here, I launched my, I have now I'm launched my 6th book in October. And I just launched my 5th book, and Sandra and I have written 5 books, which the 5th one will be published. But I launched it. It's a work that I've done with the leading sports coaches in the world ever. I studied for 5 years. And if it wasn't for Amazon, my book would be basically dead. So I really thank, I see the ranking by minute. So anyway, what are the final words for our people here?
My final words that I found at Amazon is this, that when you find a way to empower and engage your entire workforce, that you as the leader don't think that you're superior to others. In fact, part of the job of a leader is to hire people around him or herself who are better than them. That you as a leader, when you hire people and develop people who are better than you, is the best thing possible. I said I crossed that one off when I hired Beth Coletti to be my replacement, because now she's the head of all of HR for Amazon. But you have to be comfortable hiring and developing people better than yourself. The traditional way of thinking is never get anyone better than you, because they'll be a threat. And you have to overcome that. The second piece is empowering everyone to make a difference. Just like that story I told of those hourly employees in Phoenix who are overwrapping boxes wondering why they're doing this. Now, for them, it was an easy job. They were getting paid to just overwrap boxes with this, but they wondered why that was. And they were empowered to make a decision that this shouldn't be done and to surface it to their leaders. When you create a workforce where it's that engaged and that involved and feels that they can make a difference, you have a non-stoppable team. And that's what Amazon should teach people.
That's great. David, thank you very much for your interview to our platform and our book. And have you been to Brazil, David?
I have. I was in Sao Paulo in, I think it was 2015.
Okay, for Amazon?
I was there for Amazon, and I was also there with Fabio Malinsky, working with his company and working with some of his clients at the time.
Wonderful, wonderful. I hope to see you soon here.
I'd love to be able to come back. I had a great time, and I was going to come back at some point. It didn't happen, and now, of course, COVID has minimized our ability to travel. So I hope in the future that I do get the opportunity, because it was an amazing trip to be in Sao Paulo. I think I was there for close to 10 days and traveled and saw many different things there, and I was thrilled. And another key thing, I studied about Brazil when I was a cadet at West Point. The smallest group of cadets study Brazilian Portuguese, fala português in Brazil. And I used to, so I used to always, when we were at home, I'd say this is a picky nicky, and we're going to go play pingy pongy, and all the different terms that I learned, but I loved about my studies about Brazil when I was a cadet at West Point. And so I'd never been. And so it was a great thrill for me to finally go and see firsthand Brazil.
That's wonderful. I had a wonderful time at West Point, working at the tennis camps there. My friend Bob Dietrich, he played with me at South Carolina, and then he became the West Point tennis head coach.
Yes.
So he hired me for a week I'll send a picture. I'll send a funny picture that the team did for me.
Oh, I'd love to see that.
I mean, it's a really funny picture. I mean, I thought about sending you before. I said, well, let's have him meet me before I send him, because they're all dressed up like mafia with big machine guns. So I had a greatest time, and then I worked 2 tennis camps, because during the summer they opened for kids.
Oh, yes.
So I was the head pro, and I just had the most marvelous time. I had.
Oh, that's great. It's a beautiful location right there on the Hudson River.
I know. So I hope to see you soon. I think you're going to be very famous here. Believe me, with the interview that we've done, with the whole great. Everybody that matters in Brazil will see that. So appreciate.
Oh, that's great. Brazil is an amazing country. It has so much potential. And I remember we studied this, the story that the Brazilians fought in World War II, along with the Americans in Italy. It was the only country in South America that did that, which was part of the reason why Brazil was taught to a very small, only maybe 120 cadets got to study Brazil, because you as a cadet, you had to study a language in a country. And I was lucky enough to have Brazil for 2 years, my freshman and sophomore year. So I was thrilled to literally be able to get a chance to go to Brazil. And we sponsored, Fabio was a foreign exchange student for a year with us in Indiana when he was on a foreign. So that was another great experience that we had a Brazilian foreign exchange student. So great. I truly love Brazil as a country.
Yeah. So anyway, Fabio is a very good friend of Sandra, my partner and friend.
Great.
So anyway, let's keep in touch, please. Send
absolutely.
Anything we can do for you, let us know. You're being more than generous with your time and knowledge. We really appreciate, the whole Brazil appreciates, not just me. You will, I think what Amazon is doing to the world is raising the bar, not for the employees, but for everybody, because.
That was part of the mission, to create customer centricity, not just profits, not shareholder value, not just making money, but how do you focus a company around the customer? Because we're all customers, and make every company better as a result of doing that, so that the experience of everybody is better in the world. That's
great. Wonderful. Well, have a wonderful evening. And
thank you.
In touch. Thank you very much.
All right. It's been a pleasure.
Been a pleasure.
All the best.
The best.
Thanks. Bye-bye.